A very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us for our very first installment of the Good to Great, What Makes World-Class Schools webinar series, where we'll be exploring different topics related to teaching and learning, as well as understanding how we're able to connect education and research with practice. I am Shahida. I am from Marshall Cavendish Education, and I am very, very excited to be bringing you through the introductory portion for today. And as for our first installment, we will be exploring the topic of differentiated instruction, teaching for diversity across classroom and cultures. So for the webinar series, it is a collaboration between SingTeach as well as Marshall Cavendish Education. And this series was also launched as part of SingTeach's 20th anniversary, where it is a milestone that celebrates 2 decades of connecting education with research and practice. Now, SingTeach is a quarterly publication by the Office for Research at the National Institute of Education in Singapore, and it has been a long-term platform where it brought and still brings timely research-informed insights to the classroom. So as I said, today we will be going through differentiated instruction, where we will be exploring the topic of teaching approaches that adjusts instructions to meet the unique needs and interests of educators as well as their students. So just a couple of house rules. Please do turn off your mic during the webinar. And we do encourage you to turn on your camera if you choose to do so. If you do have any questions, our team will be able to help you via the chat box itself. And we will also encourage you to turn on your mic during the Q&A segment. Now, for the very first, I'll be going through our speakers for today. And for the very first segment, we have the researcher's perspective on PI, and we have Associate Professor Heng, who has been an educator and researcher for well over 20 years. Her work revolved around both profit and not-profit education, and locally she has taught geography in secondary schools before expanding her involvement with the Ministry of Education. Her research focuses on how students and teachers and their interactions, along with the pedagogical parameters itself. Up next, we have Ms. Malika from Kazakhstan. She is an education professional with 15 years of experience in the field. She has worked on administration, focusing on leadership, curriculum development, as well as academic management. She has been serving as a Methodist, implementing Singaporean teaching methodologies in Kazakhstan, aiming to enhance the quality of education in the country. And last but not least, we have Ms. Safra Al-Sawi, who is from AFA. She is the Director of International Department as well as International Accreditation with 10 years of experience as an educator. She also advocates for lifelong learning, and she'll be going through a teacher's experience of using DI in the classroom. Now, with that, I would like to invite AP Heng to start off her segment. AP Heng, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everyone here, and also very honored to be speaking to a range of audience from all around the world. I'm glad to be here. I'm Associate Professor Heng Tang from National Institute of Education in Singapore. And I see that, Marshall Cavendish Day is, in this inaugural webinar that they're conducting, they decided they are going to start off with this notion of differentiated instruction. So I'm delighted to be here to share a little bit from the researcher's perspective. So in today's session, I'm going to be talking about a researcher's perspective on differentiated instruction, particularly drawing on my own research of how differentiated instruction has been implemented in the Singapore context. So this is a brief overview of today's session. In today's session, I'm going to start first with a brief overview of differentiated instruction. And I want to do that because I want to be sure that there are many versions of differentiated instruction around the world. Many scholars use it and talk about it. So I just want to be clear about the version of a differentiated instruction and whose work I'm drawing on. And then secondly, I will then talk about very briefly my previous research, which is about teachers' challenges, the challenges that teachers face when they implement differentiated instruction in Singapore, because I feel like that's important to set up the context as I see that, we have participants from all around the world. Some of the challenges that, I discuss may be issues that are faced also in your own context. And then finally, I'm going to spend some time talking about my current research, which is still ongoing. So what you hear today will be preliminary findings, really. So in my current research, it's about teachers' localization of DI to the Singapore context. All right. Now, if we look at this chart, what we see is this is the chart documenting the number of publications about differentiated instruction, in which I'm going to call DI for short, moving forward. So this chart documents the number of research publications about DI from 2000 to 2020 for the past 20 years. So you can see that there's been a very sharp and steep increase in the amount of research that's been published on differentiated instruction. So this is a sign about the interest of differentiated instruction around the world. Now, regardless of, these publications and where they come from around the world and who the scholars are when they talk about differentiated instruction, some of the common underlying characteristics across various scholars' ideas when they talk about differentiated instruction cut across these four areas. So the first is that of recognizing student variance along with, for instance, that cognitive, that social, that cultural, or their family context. So there's this piece about recognizing why and how are students different. Second thing is that of identifying or assessing student needs and progress consistently, which means the use of consistently using assessment information, both informal or formal assessment, to feed forward into instruction. And then modifying teacher instruction to students' needs. So these needs are then, drawing on the needs that's discussed over here along that variance. And then finally, helping students make sense of learning via multiple strategies. So across different scholars, you see all these, grayed out here, all these scholars, different scholars talking about DI. Across their work, there are these four overarching characteristics that cut across various scholars' ideas of DI. In a Singapore context, Carol Ann Tomlinson's differentiated instruction is more commonly used in a Singapore context. And it is also what I've used in my own research for the framing and in terms of understanding teachers' interpretations of DI. So very briefly, I'm going to talk about Carol Ann Tomlinson's differentiated instruction. So what we see here is over here on the right side, this framework of differentiated instruction that's broken down by the principles, classroom elements, student traits, and practice. So what exactly is differentiated instruction according to Tomlinson and Moon? It is actually a teacher's proactive response to learner needs. And that proactivity means there's a certain intentionality that teachers have in terms of what they do in a classroom. Now, that proactiveness or that intentionality is shaped by a mindset. And this mindset, I'm going to pull you over to the three pillars over here. Okay, this mindset is undergirded by these philosophies. Okay, the belief or the assumption that diversity is normal and valuable, that teaching and learning is focused on a growth mindset, that teachers accept responsibility for maximum progress of all learners learning, and to recognize and remove barriers to students' learning so that everyone can access learning. So this is the kind of philosophy that undergirds differentiated instruction shaped by this mindset. And it's guided by general principles of differentiation. So I call these the 5 principles in red here, which over here in the 3 pillars chart, you'll see also, I put it in red. So the 5 principles would be that of number 1, the environment that encourages and supports learning. That means a very conducive classroom environment. Number 2, quality curriculum that's authentic, that's relevant to students' life, that's meaningful and powerful. And the third, the use of assessment that informs teaching and learning. You're going to hear that a lot, the use of assessment. And then number 4, instruction that responds to student variance. And then number 5, which is leading students and managing routines. That means ensuring that in a classroom, there are routines set up in the classroom, okay? And students know what to do and teachers can manage the classroom well. So these are the 5 overarching principles for Tomlinson's DI. And now teachers can then change up or differentiate or modify these 4 classroom elements. And the 4 classroom elements are that of content, process, or how students take in and make sense of the content, In a way, the process could be the experience or the teaching process. The third one would be the product. That means how students show, okay, what they know or understand or can do. And then finally, the effect or the environment or the tone or the classroom climate. So these are the 4 classroom elements that teachers can modify. And modify according to what? According to 3 main student traits. That is that of readiness. Frequently, readiness is associated. Some people think of readiness as their student progress or their abilities, right? Second area is that of the student interest, okay? And the third area is that of the learning profile of students, how they preferred to learn, their learning modalities, their culture, their language, their home environment, and so on and so forth. And finally, okay, differentiated instruction can be practiced through a variety of instructional strategies such as these below. And these are infinite. It doesn't mean that these are the only ways in which we can practice it. Yeah, also further practice or further ideas of practice like flexible grouping, teaching up, and so on and so forth. So this is a very broad overview of differentiated instruction. Yeah. So now I'm going to speak very briefly about my previous research, which is about the challenges teachers in Singapore face in implementing DEI in Singapore classroom. So this research was conducted pre-COVID in 2018 to 2019, comprising of 10 teachers who are starting to implement DEI in Singapore. And these teachers comprise just 5 secondary and 5 primary teachers across the different subjects, but all of them have had, professional development in differentiated instruction. So what are some of these challenges that teachers faced? The first would be that of teacher directedness. Okay, the first bucket would be that of cultural challenges. By cultural challenges, it means, challenges around, teachers grappling with existing norms, values, and behaviors in the Singapore classroom. So some of these norms, values, and behaviors are around that of teacher directedness. So teachers find that, they feel comfort and preference for teacher directedness among both teachers and students. So teachers tend to teach from a more teacher-directed perspective. So they find it harder to actually release epistemic authority to the students, to give them a sense of agency. And secondly, there's also this strong exam orientation in the case of Singapore context. Students and parents are very concerned with completing the syllabus, and there's a big focus on high stakes exams. So because of that, teachers feel like they don't have as much room to play around with using differentiated instruction. Then there's this notion of perception of face, that teachers are afraid of bringing certain things up in a classroom because they don't want to embarrass students, if they're doing different kinds of work in the classroom. And then there's this piece, which is the technological challenges. By technological challenges, I want to clarify, I do not mean things related to IT technology. By technological challenges, I'm talking about Hargreaves' idea of educational change, which is challenges related to do with issues of production or getting the tasks done in a reform process, such as the processes, structures, the competencies, the techniques. Now, under technological challenges, there's this bucket called the organization of schooling and structures. So Singapore teachers grappled with this issue of large class sizes. They say that, okay, in the case of Singapore context, we have up to 40 students in the classroom. And with 40 students, it's very hard to implement differentiated instruction or very hard to collect enough assessment information to know students well enough, right? And then there's also this piece of fixed furniture setup, okay? And timetabling, because there are all these structures, it makes it harder for teachers to then figure out, okay, what do I do when I want to put my students into group work and so on and so forth, right? And then there's also this idea of a non-homeroom system. So in a Singapore context, the teachers are the one moving around the classrooms compared to like in the US, where the students are the one moving around and going to classrooms. So teachers don't have their own homeroom. So that makes it harder for them to implement some of the strategies like, learning stations and so on. And then materials, they find it difficult locating differentiated teaching resources. The teachers in Singapore also talk about heavy workload. They have a lot of commitment to non-teaching duties, so that doesn't give them as much time to play around with lesson planning. And then there's this piece of technique and competence. So even though all the teachers in the research have actually gone through professional development in differentiated instruction, they still feel like it's hard for them to teach using differentiated instruction, because they tend to teach as they were taught because they're used to a certain way of teaching and learning when they grew up. You know, that sense of teacher directedness, the teachers making the decisions. The teachers also feel a sense of lack of confidence, okay? And feel like, with professional development, they were not supported into the classroom. Now, in terms of political challenges, by political challenges, it's this notion of having to negotiate and grapple with colleagues, with students, with parents, and everyone having very different needs. So teachers talk about this idea of needing to have control in the classroom. They need to be able to control the classroom, to see what's going on. Otherwise, if the classroom is out of control, be it in terms of students' behavior, or if the classroom is not within control, be it in terms of the kind of discussions that's taking place or the questions that's getting asked, teachers find that they will find it very hard to continue with the syllabus and with their teaching. At the same time, there's this notion of the expectations around syllabus completion and high-stakes examination. Parents and students will come and ask, why is it that certain worksheets are not done? And teachers worry about file checking, how X number of worksheets have to be completed by a certain time. So because of that centralization, they feel like there's that navigation with what they want to do individually in the classroom versus what's going on and expected by their school. And then there's this piece about collectivism versus individualism, because teacher says that, in general, the students, they prefer to work in a whole classroom setting together. They may be uncomfortable sometimes with just doing work independently by themselves. And then there's this perception of differences. The teachers are worried about being considered racist. Should they actually group students according to different groups by ethnicity or by gender, or they are worried that they may be considered sexist, or if they group them according to different readiness profile or different ability levels, they are worried that students would say that, they are being biased in terms of academic abilities. So these are some of the challenges teachers face when they are implementing differentiated instruction in Singapore. And these arise from my research in 2018 and 2019. So some of you in many different countries, who are attending this webinar, I understand that, we have, sign-ups and registrants from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from Kazakhstan, from Madagascar, and so on and so forth. Some of these challenges may actually resonate with you in terms of what Singapore teachers face. So now, in light of these challenges, and my previous research, then I ask myself, okay, how then is another way in which we can think about differentiated instruction? Instead of looking and thinking about how differentiated instruction ought to look like in terms of maybe Carol Ann Tomlinson's perspective of what DI looks like in the US context, I began to ask myself, what does DI look like in a Singapore context? Can it be that in the Singapore context, teachers recontextualize or localize differentiated instruction to Singapore? Because Singapore is in this unique place of East versus West. Okay, we have we are set in Asia, but yet we're fairly westernized to some extent because our working language is English and because of our institutions and structures and education system. So in light of that, my new research then asked this question of, okay, the current study is that of teachers' localization of DI in Singapore. So I asked the question, how do teachers in Singapore localize DI for the Singapore context? So this study is then conducted between 2023 to 2025. We just wrapped up data collection actually. So what you hear today are actually preliminary findings. Okay, so we're still in a process. So again, this is preliminary findings. We hope that in a year's time, we'll have a more solid set of data that comes forth. But in light of Marshall Cavendish's webinars that's starting this May, I've been asked to share my preliminary findings first. So this is the data that we've collected, with 11 teachers. We observe all the teachers 3 times each, and then we interview them as well. And then these are primary school teachers now. Primary school teachers across different subjects, okay? Academic subjects as well as non-academic subjects like art, music, physical education as well. All teachers have had some form of training or workshop or professional development in differentiated instruction as well, okay? And a mix of gender and ethnicity for the teachers. All right, so here's a quick summary of the findings. The quick summary of the findings is that the first block I'm going to share about is this notion of localization that reflect philosophies that reflect pragmatism, balance, collectiveness, and fairness. Okay, ideas or assumptions or values that Singapore value and how that comes out in our Singapore classroom and how teachers try to work these values and juxtapose it with, that of differentiated instruction. Then the second block would be that of the alignment of principles. And these alignment are seen in terms of the principles of quality curriculum, using assessment to inform instruction, and creating a conducive classroom environment. And finally, the last part would be that of recontextualization. How when DI is recontextualized, there's something very unique in the Singapore context, which is that of what we call a learner-centeredness, okay? But it is a learner-centeredness that is also teacher-directed. It's a teacher-directed learner-centeredness. Okay, let's look at that of localization, okay? And these values that we value in Singapore. Singapore fundamentally is a society, is highly pragmatic and efficient. So when teachers want to use practices and strategies from differentiated instruction and want to see how that works in their classroom, oftentimes they're always thinking, okay, how can I choose principles and practices that work for themselves and for their students, as well as juggle all the various academic and non-academic outcomes they have of education, as well as the workload they have and all the constraints that I talked about earlier. So the first thing they use is pragmatism, and what they do is they use multifunctional teaching strategies because they're trying to do so much at one time. So what they want to do then is for each teaching strategy that they choose, teachers will try to make sure that that single strategy can hit at multiple goals or purposes simultaneously. So let's look at participant number 7 in this case, okay? Now, this is an English language classroom, and this is at the beginning of a topic, an English language topic, where the students are reading and learning about martial arts. That's the premise of the text. So right in the beginning of the lesson, okay, before they start, this teacher, P7, okay, participant number 7, have students do an exercise of free writing about martial arts. All right. So using technology, as you see here, everyone writes about what they know about martial arts. Okay. To do that, okay, the teacher is actually trying to hit at multiple things. The first thing is the teacher tries to do knowledge activation and interest generation, right? Trying to invite students into the quality curriculum. Secondly, the teacher is also doing pre-assessment over here. So by getting students to contribute first, okay, and getting a sense of what students write about, teachers are collecting the assessment data. Remember, assessment data is important in differentiated instruction to get a sense of what exactly students already know about martial arts. And then at the same time, the teacher, in using technology or getting every student to respond in this way, okay, tries to be inclusive in getting students who do not like to speak publicly and giving them a chance to showcase their opinions. So remember, one piece of DI is that of that modality, okay, using multimodal ways in which students can actually access the content, okay, or the process, the learning process in the classroom. So by getting students to share in this way, okay, she's able to get at everyone to contribute. Okay, and then after that, she gets the class to share orally about what they know about martial arts. So this is an example of multifunctional teaching strategy. Use one strategy and use it in many different ways to achieve many different goals. Secondly, that of pragmatism, again. Now with pragmatism, again, choosing practices and principles that work for them. Now, in the Singapore context, I had mentioned before already that the classroom size can tend to be largish, right? About 30, 40s in a primary 1 classroom, primary 1, 2 classroom, maybe it's about 30. But then after that, primary 3, 4, 5, 6, and into secondary, sometimes you can have up to 40 students in a classroom. So the teachers are very aware that in light of the large numbers of students, how can they try to cater to the students' needs? There's something very unique that teachers do that is very pragmatic. what they try to do is to get students to support each other. So teachers are aware that they themselves cannot be the only one in the classroom. So they try to get students to become peer teachers to support each other. What this means is that teachers spend a long time thinking about how they seat their students. So they spend a long time thinking about who sits next to who, thinking about readiness, like making sure that there is a student who is weaker with someone who's stronger, the temperament, whether they get along with each other, the gender, and then after that, the ethnicity, making sure that you have a mix of races in the group. So while the teacher is doing all that, the teacher is trying to help the students learning, but at the same time is also trying to get at non-academic goals, which is that of mixing and ethnic mixing and gender mixing and temperament mixing and so on and so forth, which is one of the outcomes of education in Singapore. We want to have an inclusive classroom where everyone mix, okay, and multiracialism is actually valued. So over here, you see that teachers spend a lot of time figuring out who is seated next to who, okay? And at the same time, give me a second. Sorry, okay? Teaching students to get used to all these grouping strategies in the classroom so that there's that flexibility. So as you see in participant 11's classroom, usually they are seated this way in groups, right, during teaching. But sometimes when teachers want them to do individual work, she will say, okay, I want you to get into individual tables now. And then the students right away, they know how to move their tables, right? So this is an example of how the teacher uses these routines and management in the classroom. All right, next, I'm going to move on quickly. There's that of balance. Teachers are constantly trying to balance things, okay? Whole class instruction, small group instruction, and when that's not possible, when small group instruction is not possible, then they will do after school remediation. So in the lesson, there may be think, pair, share, then there may be teacher-led discussion, teacher guidance, and then followed by individual working of students with the worksheets, and then the teachers working in small group. In terms of balance, teachers are also trying to balance the modern with the traditional. So in this case, you can see while there's something called, teachers use something called the student learning space, which is the Ministry of Education's proprietary learning management system. So while they have this, okay, while they have the student learning space going on over here, at the same time, what's going on is that teachers will also print worksheets, hard copy worksheets for the students, all right? So there's this balance of the old and the new at the same time. Now, in terms of collectiveness, they emphasize non-academic outcomes like inclusivity and awareness of the larger community. They talk about things like turn-taking, respect for others, and peer support. So all this is a very big thing in creating this classroom climate that values each other. And by creating that kind of classroom climate where collectivism is valued, teachers can then say, okay, now let's support each other in the peer teaching process. If I give you worksheets that's scaffolded, now I want you to teach each other. If one of you finish and one of you is faster than another, then I want you to teach each other as well. Next is that of fairness, okay? The notion of fairness is very important to teachers in a sense that in the case of Singapore teachers, what they want to do is always to uplift the weaker students, but without capping the stronger students. And I think this is quite a unique value that Singapore values as a society in general, which means we know there's a weak and disenfranchised. We want to always constantly uplift them through our policies, any government policies, but at the same time, we don't try to cap, okay, those who can go further. So what the teachers do would be to create scaffolding, for a lot of scaffolding for students at the bottom so that they can reach upwards, but then at the same time offer extensions to students who have already reached, so they can then do interest activities, extension, and so on. In this case, teachers may use manipulatives to offer multimodalities in learning to support the scaffolding. Or in this example, as you can see, okay, teachers offer scaffolding over here, okay. In getting students to write, the teachers have these fill in the blanks option to help students when talking about similarities. You have to say both something and something. And then when it's differences, you have to say something but something. And then further on, okay, these scaffold structures are removed after that. All right, so there's this block about these philosophies and values that's in a classroom and how that plays out. Now, in terms of alignment, there are some things that align fairly well in a Singapore context. The first thing is that of the MOE syllabus. Okay, Singapore teachers follow the MOE syllabus extremely closely. Okay, and that syllabus outcomes inform lesson teaching. In the past, research has often said that, oh, differentiated instruction may not work well in a system which is highly centralized. But in the case of a Singapore context, this research is showing what it shows is that teachers actually realize that, look, having that MOE syllabus can be very helpful because if I want to change my instruction up or down, vary in terms of difficulty or provide scaffolding and so on and so forth, I need to know what is that minimum standards and what I'm looking for. So that MOE syllabus and centralized document is actually powerful for them. They use it as a starting point. So my research actually shows that actually it is not incompatible. Okay, differentiated instruction is not incompatible when there is a syllabus because that syllabus can be helpful. Next, another area of alignment is that of using assessment to inform instruction. That means consistently using formal and informal assessment data to inform instruction. Now, what is unique in the case of the Singapore context that might not be as common in other contexts is that there is the learning management system that Singapore Ministry of Education creates, which is the student learning space, and teachers use it frequently. So I got to say that pre-COVID, okay, this was not common at all, I don't see it. But post-COVID, because teachers face the challenge of collecting sufficient assessment data to help them in their instruction. How teachers get around or circumvent this challenge of collecting assessment data oftentimes is they use SLS, okay? Online tools to help them with collecting assessment information so that they can quickly decide how they would modify instruction. Next, another alignment is that of creating a conducive classroom environment. As I had already shown earlier, there's this piece of teachers, spending a lot of time thinking about what is this collective classroom environment, building up a classroom tone that's supportive for all. So they focus on the emotional safety of students. They avoid highlighting deferring task difficulty. Instead, the teachers may give them the task quietly and then get them. There may be different tasks with different amount of scaffolding. The teachers do not say that. They just scaffold them quietly. At the same time, the teacher is very aware of always trying to change the group composition. So which means that maybe for this lesson, students are grouped according to high readiness, middle readiness, and low readiness. But for the next lesson, they may change students and they are grouped according to their interests. And then for the next lesson, the students may choose who they want to partner up with. So that change, that constant changing of flexible grouping then will downplay this readiness disparity in the classroom and also help to protect students' esteem by reducing unhealthy comparison. Okay? So as you see over here, the teacher at the back creates this calming corner, for students that students can go to at the back of the classroom whenever they feel, stressed out. Another example of, this kind of creating a conducive classroom environment is to create, learning opportunities that increase scaffolding for students and to focus on progress rather than gaps. So in this example of a physical education classroom over here, the teacher is teaching students how to play floorball, but understand that students have different readiness level. So what the teacher did then is to ask students who are low readiness to use a beanbag which moves slowly, okay? Then middle readiness to use a rubber point, okay, which moves a little faster, and the ones who are high readiness to use a floorball so they can move quickly when they're maneuvering and practicing. So by using that, okay, students can all access the floorball activity and they can they can all experience a sense of success and they feel motivated to continue. Now, this piece about recontextualization, right? Teacher-directed learner-centeredness. So what's interesting in the Singapore context is that when teachers make decisions, it is, while differentiated instruction is what we call a learner-centered pedagogy, there is a certain teacher-directed learner-centeredness. And that teacher-directedness is actually preceded by this foregrounding of the achievement of learning objectives. So everything teachers think about, it's not just about the learner. They're thinking about the learner, okay, vis-a-vis the learning goal. I have this learning goal that I need to achieve. I have to ensure my students learn. Now, in achieving this learning goal, perhaps I can pay some attention to what my learner needs are in terms of their readiness or their interests or their profiles, and how can I then work some of these towards achieving my learning goal. So ultimately, any variance or learner differences that is considered is always thinking in terms of that learning goal in mind, okay? And learners' needs also are considered, okay, in terms of perhaps providing some student agency or choice for them, okay? So that learner-centeredness and self-directedness is always structured within the curricular constraints. So there's learner-centeredness, but it's a teacher-directed form of learner-centeredness in the Singapore context because of our unique context. So a couple quick examples, and then I'm going to start to wrap up, okay? In a science lesson, for example, the teacher said, okay, now you can choose to compare two life cycles of two animals. I want you to compare and contrast life cycles of two animals. But the teacher say, okay, you can choose, but you have to choose within these, 7 animals, which is in the mandated list that's stipulated by MOE. So you see, there's choice, but there's choice within that boundary. All right, okay. Again, this as well, in an art graded task, students are provided with a 3x3 choice board. Students can choose tasks to do. But at the same time, the teacher said, the teacher cannot cope with a product that comes back that is way too varied. So there is always that kind of boundary set as well. There's choice, but it's not absolute free choice. It's a kind of teacher-directed choice, okay, within a certain boundary. So this is what we mean by a sense of a teacher-directed learner-centeredness. Now, wrapping up, what does that mean for recommendations for all of us here from around the world? Perhaps when we use any kind of educational ideas from overseas, be it Singapore math, I see some of you may be using Singapore math in your context, or using lesson study from Japan, or differentiated instruction from the US. What we want to do is to consider how can we localize some of these educational approaches to our local context. And to do that, what we want to think of is to pay attention to the undergirding philosophy. How do these philosophies align with that of your context? Are there aspects which does not align at all? If it doesn't align, what will you do about it? And how can you recontextualize it and localize it? At the same time, what we want to do is not to just focus only on the strategies, but also think about the stance. By stance, I mean the philosophy, the principles, the ways of approaching an educational idea. Okay? We also want to pay attention to the principles and consider how principles can be applied, not just strategies, because oftentimes if we just only apply strategies, at one point we will find that things will break down because the strategies will bump up against all the local, challenges in the local setting. So understanding the principles and what they stand for is more important than just merely learning the strategies. So be very careful about a narrow focus on implementing only strategies, as it may result in unintended consequences. At the same time, we also want to increase sensitivity to context. Okay, we want to study the context clearly before applying education ideas from abroad. I show you this diagram here, which means this is almost like a telescope, If you think about it, which means when you have to look at all these lenses. In the origin context, that means the origin of where that education idea come from. Let's say it's from the US, or Singapore math is from Singapore, or lesson study is from Japan. Think about what are the socio-cultural, the political, the technological structures in the origin country, and also think about the destination country where it's being borrowed to, right? What are the social, cultural, political, or technological norms like in these countries? And think about these two vis-a-vis each other to see where there may be challenges and where there may be alignment. And if there are challenges, what can be done to circumvent it, or how might things need to be tweaked? And with that, I will end today's sharing. These are some references if you are interested in following up with some of the ideas that I've discussed in my sharing today. So I hope that today's sharing have given you this big idea of what happens when we borrow educational ideas like differentiated instruction from a different context to our own context. And I'm sure that our other presenters later will share more and further more interesting ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, AP Heng. I think that definitely was a segment that was very insightful and gave a lot of, good parameters that introduce us to the topic, as well as introduce the notion of learner-centeredness, as well as directed by the teachers as well within the Singapore context. And without further ado, I would like to invite Miss Malika, where she will show, or she would go through the processes with her team on a school leader's perspective of DI. Miss Malika, please.
Hello, everyone. Good day, everyone. It's really nice to see everyone from different countries, and it was really great to hear Dr. Hang about differentiation. And I personally received myself lots of insights and some ideas what we can use as research in our school because we were looking for some ideas what kind of research we can implement in our school context for the next academic year. So thank you, Dr. Hang, for these great ideas and insights about differentiation that we will definitely try to use. Today, I would like to talk about, just a second, today I'd like to talk about differentiation from the perspective of the leaders, school leadership. How can we help and ease the teachers' challenges they face every day while implementing differentiation? Before saying that, let me tell you that I'm from Kazakhstan. Let's talk about the education in Kazakhstan in short, in case you don't know. I work currently in the primary school from grades 0 to 4. Here in Kazakhstan, we have a primary education from grade 0 to 4. And before grade 0, the kids go to the kindergarten. And further, we have the secondary education and higher education as well. Today, I'd like to focus on the primary education particularly because this was the area I've been working the last 5 years. And the language of instruction in the primary schools in Kazakhstan are Kazakh or Russian, depends on the mother language of the students. If there are 4 languages, as I heard in Singapore, then we have 2 languages, mother language of the kids. And English, Russian, and Kazakh is used as the secondary language or the foreign language and is implemented only from the grades 3. That is why before, like 2 years ago, we had a strategy where students had to study all 3 languages simultaneously at the same time from grade 1. But the last couple of years, the Ministry of Education decided to change this situation and implement the mother language immersion system. That is why the kids they need to study the secondary language from grade 3 only. So and the implementation of English or Russian languages are up to 2 hours a week. But I work in the private school. There is a huge difference between the state schools and the private schools, as private schools can implement some differences, some more subjects to in order to interest the parents, because the private schools are mostly parents have to pay in order to give their kids. And I talk about differentiation. The topic I'm going to, there are 3 things I'm going to focus on differentiation, primarily how we use in this school, in this primary private school. First, we divide the lessons, the subjects into the phases, particularly English and math. Then we also use some methods as stations and groupings in teaching. And the last one, we also use some group rotations in PE and math. So let me tell you about these 3 things that we use in our school. As Dr. Heng also mentioned, there are some different situations in the context which we think of while implementing differentiation. These are the readiness of the students, the level of the language of the students, in our case, because English language is considered as the second language, foreign language in our context, and also according to their interests, their age, their learning styles, and also their social emotional needs, which is also important. So the first thing we use differentiation is in the language context, especially in the English language teaching. We use phase division in English language teaching. Our school also implements the IB program, International Baccalaureate Program, and according to this IB program, the schools are advised to be divided into the phases while teaching different and foreign languages. So in teaching English, we divide students into 3 to 4 phases, and the students are divided into the phases not in one level grades. In our case, we take grade 1 and 2 students and grade 3 and 4 students, and we divide these 2 grades into phases. 3 and 4 phases. What's the why it is important to divide the students into the phases is that the first one is it supports the developmental differences because according to the age, the students gain the language differently. That is why we take the students of grade 1 and 2 into one phase and then divide them into 3 phases. That's why in this age, it is much easier for them to study together and also to study in their level. And then it is much easier for the teachers to plan the whole year. When the students are divided into the phases, it is much easier to plan different phases. For example, phase 1 stands for the strongest students, A-star students, and phase 2 stands for the students who do not struggle with the language but can be slow in language learning. And phase 3 stands for the students who are struggling with learning the language or have never studied language before. So when we divide the students into these 3 different phases, it is much easier for the teachers to plan the whole year. In August, we plan by the way, our year starts in September. Academic year starts in September and finishes in May. So this is actually the end of our academic year. These couple of days we're celebrating the year of our academic year. That is why in August our teachers create the academic plan for the next year. And it is much easier to plan the year when you know that there are 3 different phases, and although the outcomes are planned to be the same for all levels, it is much easier to think of the methods, the structures, the ways the differentiation is going to be implemented in these phases. And also it boosts the language acquisition. Why? Because the language acquisition is like the sport itself. When you go to the swimming pool, you do not see the different people swimming in the aisles. The different aisles are used for different purposes. For example, the first aisle is also always used for the kids who are new to learning and who are for the kids who are under age 12, for example. And the second aisle is for the amateurs, for the beginners, for the ones who would like to study themselves without the coach. And the aisles 3, 4, and 5, 6 are for the professional swimmers. That is why the students, the people who use the swimming pool, can have effective swimming lesson. So the same thing is with the phases while dividing into phases in English. The thing is, this boosts the language acquisition of all the level of the students. For example, the ones who are really good at language, they can prepare for the Olympiads, and then they can also develop their language skills in the subject level. Whereas the ones who have only started learning the language, they boost their language skill because they study in their own pace and they start from the beginning. And also, this eases the classroom management because from the beginning of the year, the phases know we divide actually the phases into different classrooms. That is why there is no actually difficulty with the classroom management. And also, in our classes, there are 20. The largest number of the students is 20, and there is 1 teacher and 1 teaching assistant. Usually, the teaching assistant helps in phase 1, where students need some help. And also, this dividing into phases enables differentiation. Even if the students are divided into the phases, the teachers are still encouraged to use differentiation, and this gives them more opportunity to use different methods and use some experiments, do some research in their differentiation, especially the lesson study. The teachers find it much easier to conduct lesson study research when the students are divided into the phases. So this is why we divide the students into phases in English. And also we are planning, and we are gradually implementing the phase division in math lessons as well, regardless of the language. Math is actually taught in two languages, Kazakh, Russian, and English languages, and we would like to implement phase division in math as well. Why we would, but there's a difference between dividing students into phases in math and English, which I'm going to say further. Why we divide the students in math into phases is that first, it gives more space and opportunity for students to have some individual learning opportunities from the teacher. Because when there are 20 students in the class and there are different levels in math, imagine these two different situations. The students have different levels in math and they have to study in the same lesson, or the students have comparingly the same level, and they need to study math in their own level. This gives the students more opportunities first to study for peer learning, to learn from each other, and then for the teacher to find out the area that students struggle in math. And also the same thing as mentioned before, the better classroom management. So we found the huge difference between the classroom management before dividing the students into phases, and after we found a huge difference. Teachers told us that it's much easier when the students are divided into the phases. And the participation level is much higher. The students who study in phase 3, the ones who struggle in math, they later told us that it is much more interesting and easier to participate in math lessons rather than they were divided into phases before. And also, we have some academic sounding assessments every term, and we found that it's much easier when the students are divided into the phases, not only in English but also in math, that when they are divided into these phases, it is much more easier to predict the grades they are going to have in summative assessments, and to find out the solution for the problems, especially with the struggling students. And also it gave us opportunity to find out some other areas where students struggle. For example, we found out one student with dyslexia. We found that one student has difficulties in memorizing the numbers, recognizing the numbers with the help of this phase division. And also the progression in phase division in math is more smoother, because it is the developments in the improvements in the learning in math is much easier when they are divided into the phases, and the progress is much smoother. So let me tell you the difference between the phase division in English and math. The thing is, the students are divided in the beginning of the year into the phases in math and English, but we are planning to have the same level of the students, at least in phase 2 by the end of the year in math. If in English, they might stay in the same phase by the end of the year, because all the phases have their own goal to develop by the end of the year. But in math, we are planning to get rid of the phase 1 students. The purpose of the teacher is to enhance the level of literacy in math, and to help the students of phase 1 to jump into phase 2 and 3. And if the students in English are divided into the skills in language, regardless their age, because we take the students of grade 1 and 2 and divide them into 3 phases, and we take another group of students of grades 3 and 4 and divide it into 3 phases. So here we can have one classroom of the students of grade 1 and 2 at the same time. But in math, we cannot do so according because of the curriculum. That is why we can only take one grade level of the students. And in math, when we divide them into the phases, we do not only look at their skills, but also need to check their subject knowledge, which is also important, because even if math curriculum is created according to the spiral curriculum, the students still need to have some subject knowledge in each level, which they cannot miss. So here is the difference between the phase division in English and math. And also, let's go further about the grouping students. So how can we help the teachers to ease the challenges that they face while differentiation is, we give them some methods and tips of grouping students. They can use different kinds of methods, especially the ones that Dr. Han gave, and I made some notes, and I'm going to use in my further PD to tell the teachers. And for example, there are some group managing or group division tips which we use. The most important ones are this one. For example, if you look at these two groups, there is group group A, and two groups, group A and group B. Have a look at these groups and tell me, please, which of these groups has A-star students, or the ones who are very quick students. Which one do you think? You can write in the chat if you want. So imagine there is one classroom and the teacher is giving an English lesson, and there are two groups, group A and group B. Group A needs to work on the topic revision task first, and then needs to do some independent work, and in the end they go and check everything with the teacher, while group B starts everything with the teacher first. Teacher explains and gives some instructions, and then they revise the topic with the teacher, and then in the end, by the end of the lesson, they do some individual group work. Group B students. That's a very interesting answer. Thank you. Actually, the A-star students, or the ones who are very quick over here, are situated in group A, because group A students are able to work on their own individually without seeking the help from the teacher. But group B students, they need a teacher at the beginning of the lesson, especially when they revise the topic, when they need to listen to the instructions several times, or maybe just to revise the previous topics with the teacher, and then by the end of the lesson, they will be able to work individually. Rather than group A, the one which has maybe the quick students, the A-star students, they can work on their own. They can revise the topic on their own and do some group work. And then in the end, they can go and check everything they've done throughout the lesson with the teacher. And the teacher can give some feedback on their work. Okay, I can actually send this slide to Miss to the moderator, and then they can send you these slides later. So inside the groups during the lesson, we use this kind of differentiation, where the students actually have no idea that they are divided into the groups. They use this kind of differentiation, but the teacher knows the difference between the groups. That is why most of the time the teacher supports and tries to help group B students, while group A students work on their own and only needs the teacher's attention at the end of the lesson, where they receive the feedback, and then might also receive further tasks or further group projects at the end of the lesson. And also another way of grouping we use in our school is, I guess, one of the most famous ideas or methods that we use. Anyone knows where this math is used, or what kind of method is used in this math, with the help of this math? Most of my colleagues should know. Have you ever seen this kind of math, or have you ever used this math in your lessons, especially in math? We use them in math, science lessons. Anyone? So this kind of math is used actually in the Kagan structure. One of the structures we implement a lot in our teaching in the school. How this Kagan structure is used and how these maths are used. Especially in the primary school context, this is one of the most useful things we use in our classroom. I guess we use it in all of the subjects. So all of our classrooms that have this kind of maths. So, according to this maths, students are located in the groups of 4. So, 4 desks are located together, and students work in groups. But there is a hidden strategy behind dividing the students into groups, these kind of groups. So, each group has 4 students. But the strategy is like this. So the first students and A student, which is over here. Let me show you with an arrow. So the so So the first students, the high achiever student is over here, located closer to the teacher, because he is a high achiever student and he is going to be the role model for this group. And most of the time, he is the one who is the leader of the group. And the second student is a low achiever, is seated just next to him. Why? In order to benefit, to receive support from the A student, and sometimes they can have a peer teaching, and a student can also help and support and teach sometimes the C student. And the third student is a middle achiever and is seated here. Why? Because these 2 students actually, the ones who are, the third student actually is the one who is, who can be like a B student, the one who is sometimes can be the one who works really hard. Sometimes he struggles in some topics. So he's not always an A-star student. He's not always the one who is very quick, but he's the one who can actually, who has a steady progress in learning. And the last one, the fourth student, is the D student, who is sitting next to these students, the middle achiever student, because he also seeks help and support from this student. So why we locate the students like this is because this way students can first help each other, and second, students can have different roles. For example, I can give you one example. In writing or reading in English, let's take writing. When you give a group task, a student starts first because he is very quick. He needs some attention. He wants to start first. So you give give an opportunity to a student to start first. He writes the sentence. While he's writing his sentence, the other students have an opportunity to think first, to have a look at his sentence, to have some ideas, maybe to seek some help. And then when the chance is given to the second student, a student can help the student, and also this student can have some motivation, or maybe some looking at the A student, he starts to write and work well. And the next one is given to the third student. So when the third student is writing, the others can also give some feedback, discuss the ideas. And the last one is the struggling student can finish the sentence, or maybe the paragraph, which is much easier to write the finishing sentence. And also he, while the others were writing the sentences, he already might have some ideas, or maybe can ask for help from the teacher, from his peers. So this kind of doing activities in using this maths makes much easier to work in groups. And also, using this math, the students can also work. They can have face partners, the shoulder partners, and also sometimes teacher can give some tasks to the students facing like not each other, but also to the student number 1 and 3, number 2 and 4 in different situations. So using this math, the student can actually, the teacher can actually use this math and give different type of tasks, plan lesson in advance, and it gives more chance to develop classroom management, because the students they know their places. Usually we sit or manage these places at the beginning of the term, and we might change these places each term. But of course, it's up to the teacher. Whenever the teacher wants to change the places, the teacher can change the places. But this math itself helps a lot to the teacher during the lesson to manage the students, to give different tasks, to differentiate. Sometimes, and also this math gives opportunity to work in pairs, individually, in groups. So this is a really nice math to use during the lesson. That is all. And also another way of differentiation in our school is the stations. Our classrooms are designed as the stations itself. So there is a reading corner, writing corner, different kinds of corners. The only corner I was thinking today after Dr. Heng's speech is that we need some calming corner, I guess. So teachers can use these corners, but also they can use the stations themselves. Looking at this picture, you can think of the different stations. So these stations also help the teacher to manage the class. First of all, second, the students can go through these stations on their own pace. So regardless the level of the students, regardless the speed of the students, the main purpose is the students need to go through all of the stations. So during the lesson, the teacher can have from 4 to 6 stations during the lesson, and the purpose of the students is, of course, to go through all of the 6 stations. But there might be some students who go through 3 or maybe less stations, which is okay for their level. That is why this is also a hidden type of differentiation, where teacher knows the level of the students and can come up to some of the students and say, if today if you go through 3 stations, it is okay. So the only at the beginning of the lesson, teacher gives kind of a task where it said that today our purpose is to go through at least 3 stations, at the most all of the stations in 40 minutes. The lessons last 40 minutes. So according to these stations, the teacher can also have some feedback from the students, or maybe some formative assessment, like the areas they are struggling. The teacher also takes notes and also helps the students in different stations. And stations may vary from the skills to the language level, or maybe to the subject level, or maybe to the topics. So according to these stations, the teacher can take also some notes and also find out the areas of improvement which the teacher needs to work in lessons further. So, and also another idea we use in our lesson. I'm sorry for this weird pictures of the legs. And another way is to the cross-subject group rotations. This was the idea of my vice principal, and we found it a great idea. Our PE teacher was struggling with grade 0 and 1 kids, because there are 20 students in the classroom, and we didn't know how to help the teacher to differentiate, or maybe to make the lesson more effective. And that is why we divided to create these subject rotations. So half of the students, the class is divided into 2. The half of the students go to PE lessons at the same time. The half of the students go to another lesson as the social studies, sciences, or maybe Kazakh language, any subject. So when we divided into these groups and rotated the subjects, it gave more efficacy. First, the efficacy level raised. Second, it gave more chance to the teacher to differentiate. First of all, to cover all the lesson agenda. And as the age of the students is really low, like grade 1 and 2 students age 7 and 8, that is why it was much more easy for the teacher to provide the quality lesson when there are 10 students rather than having all 20 students during the lesson. So these small group sizes actually help the teacher to raise the efficacy of the lesson. These subject rotations can be done in any subject, but we divided to rotate 2 different subjects just to see the effect in the end. And the students actually found it really interesting because when you rotate 2 different subjects as PE and some academic subject as, for example, science, English, or any other subject, it gives or maybe math, it gives students to the opportunity to taste different subjects as PE and any other academic subject. So this is another way we use differentiation in our school. That is it. So to wrap up my speech is first we use phases to divide students in English, and further next year we are planning to divide into the phases in math. Second, we use different types of grouping, different strategies in grouping, and also different methods as stations. So one of the most favorite methods is stations, and because these methods of stations gives more opportunity for movement, and also makes it easier to manage the classroom, especially when the age of the students is really low. And also we use this rotation, subject rotation, which doesn't require actually extra teaching resource because teachers do not have more teaching hours. We just divide the classrooms into 2 and rotate the subjects. For example, if the first half they have PE, the second half they are going to have math and social sciences. And so group 1 has PE and social sciences, group 2 has social sciences and PE. So this was the easiest way to find for us for differentiation and to help the teachers who were struggling with the classroom management, especially. That's it for me. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer all of the questions, but I guess I am out of my time. Am I?
Thank you so much, Ms. Manika. I think it was very insightful, and just learning about the educational landscape of Kazakhstan, as well as how you and your team managed to go through the academic year, understanding the different rotations, different strategies, and implementing them for the different needs of the students. And without further ado, last but definitely not least, we will have our final speaker for the day, Ms. Safa, who will be going through her experience as a teacher as well as within the KSA region about differentiated instruction. Ms. Safa, please.
Let me start with differentiation as an approach of teaching. The most important thing here to focus on is student-centered. We have to focus on the individual strength and area of growth. Number 2, flexible grouping. Student work in varied group based on the task or their need. Ongoing assessment, guided instruction and adjustment, and respectful task. Each learner receive a challenging, meaningful work. Here, differentiation may occur in the content, process, product, and learning environment. How it's come in the content is what the student learn exactly. Process, how do they learn it? Product, how do they show what they learned exactly? Learning environment, where and with whom learning occur. Let's start with the first one, content, varying reading level, visual or audio support. The process, we can choose different tasks like video, journal, different activities, as we mentioned before, based on their level. Product, choose choice of input poster, kit, report, and also flexible deadlines or rubric. Let's talk about here the alignment of differentiation with the curriculum. Here in our school, for example, and based on my experience as a teacher before, in the primary section, we have PYP. From grade 6 up to grade 9, we have international. So we are using Common Core State Standard. From grade 9 up to grade 12, national curricula. So now we will explain how the differentiation alignment of differentiation with the curriculum. Here, all of them, differentiation does not change the learning goals. It's just the path or the way to guide you how to use the effective way of learning in order to achieve your goal. Maintains rigors and high expectations. As we mentioned before, different ways to access a process and understanding. And how it's aligned is a flexible method to meet fixed outcomes, encourage mastery of all the learners. Best differentiate practice in my classroom. First of all, use of pre-assessment. So identify the student readiness, interest, and learning portfolios early. Choice board and menus allow the student to choose the task they are suitable for them. For example, you can divide the classroom in different groups and ask them or allow student to choose their task that is suit for their learning style. Flexible groups, rotate group based on their skills, progress, or interest, and also offer varying level of challenge for the same learning goal. Finally, you have to get the feedback. The feedback, it should be ongoing. For example, here, best practice in my classroom. Differentiation in students' work during the research is efficient through the varied outcomes produced by each group, despite of working on the same topic. This is because the students were grouped homogeneously. That means homogeneously based on their skill level. As a result, each group approached in the research and presenting their findings in a way that reflected their collective strength, understanding, and interpretation, leading to different yet meaningful. For example, look at the green group. They are doing different tasks, crafting a poster. Whereas blue group, also you can name the groups in order to make the environment flexible and fun for the student to help to encourage them to work and participate. The red group presenting game, whereas the yellow one is writing reports. Differentiation in math session is shown through a student working in different tasks aligned with the same learning objectives. As I said, heterogeneously is mixing a skill level to support peer learning. Look here, for example, the green, by the way, the student in the math lab, in order to change the atmosphere for the student, if you have English class, you have to go to the English lab. Math class, you have to go to math lab. So in the math lab, for example, the green group working special worksheets different, whereas blue group playing an online game. The third one is using objective to finish tasks, whereas the yellow one creating craft clock. The lesson was about the numbers and the clock. Benefits of differentiation in my classroom. As I mentioned before, I here shared my experience as an English teacher, homeroom teacher. Especially in our class, we use two types of groups, homogeneous and heterogeneous. Homogeneous group during research task allows focused support based on the group needs, encourage deeper exploration aligned with the student's strength, result in diverse, meaningful presentation on the same topic, build confidence through skills match collaboration. Another type is heterogeneous grouping in math especially, and promotes peer teaching and learning, encourages collaboration and empathy, allows strong students to reinforce understanding by explaining the concept, supporting struggling with the student, accessibly to help in real time. As a teacher here, a differentiation plays very important role to achieve or to shaping learning, to achieving learning, to achieving effective learning environment, to create environment of enthusiasm between the student, to make sure that my student understand the lesson, and also make sure that all of them got the learning or achieve the objective that I'm gonna to achieve. Differentiation is very important thing, and you have to use it in the classroom to achieve your goal, and focus on two groups, homogeneous and heterogeneous. If you follow these steps in differentiation, you can get or you can show the result of your hard working as a teacher to achieve the goals of learning. I talked in briefly because we don't have time in order to give you space to ask and answer questions. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Safa. Would there be any other pointers that you would like to share, Ms. Safa, before we enter into
I'm sorry,
Q&A segment?
but the video is not working. That's why I'm sorry for that.
No worries at all. So thank you so much to all of our speakers. Perhaps we'll give a minute or two for anybody to write down any comments for the upcoming Q&A segment. So once again, thank you so much to all our speakers. And I think that pertaining to Ms. Safa's presentation, I believe she started from the first point of content. But Ms. Safa, if there's anything else you would like to share during this Q&A segment, based on your whole entire presentation, please feel free to do so as well. Why don't we wait for a minute or two before any other questions would like to come in? Nothing, maybe prior to waiting for any other questions or while we wait for the questions to come in, I do have a couple of questions. Maybe we would like to open a conversation with AB Heng. First of all, I think your presentation was very interesting in terms of showing the Singapore values. And as you mentioned, we have quite of a diverse audience from many different regions who may not be as privy to or would probably be hearing about Singapore values as well as learner-centeredness for the very first time. So looking at within the aspects of maybe assessment data or looking in a more general aspect, what would be your advice based on the research that you have conducted for any school to or any team to kind of embark on this journey of differentiated instruction? And what aspects of the Singapore values would you highlight that to be the most important for them to inculcate within their own specific strategies, even looking at political challenges, readiness, interest, as well as their learning profile?
Thank you very much, Shahida, for the question. So I see that there are two parts to this question, right? The first part is actually looking at what's going on, what advice would I give any educators from around the world about if they were to implement differentiated instruction. I think one important advice would be to start with getting good assessment information. I think that the word differentiated instruction tends to be misused, misinterpreted, and many people are confused by the word differentiated as well as the word instruction. So they tend to think that maybe differentiated instruction has to do with only strategies or something. But really, if I may, I use, and I'm pretty clear about that kind of ring fencing earlier, right? That I use, and I draw heavily on Carol Ann Tomlinson's work on differentiated instruction in an academically diverse classroom. If I were to use that, then I think the idea of assessment is critical. Whenever schools call me up to ask me to run workshops in their school or do professional development in their school for differentiated instruction, the first thing I tend to ask is always, what is the assessment literacy like for your teachers in your school? Because I think it's important to have for teachers to have strong assessment literacy, okay, before they can, apply the whole gamut, the whole framework of differentiated instruction well. Because if they're unable to get good data or information about students, be it students' learning, be it students' background, be it students' interests, or any other aspects about the students, their preferred learning modality, and so on and so forth, then it's harder to then, tweak instruction accordingly to support their needs. So I would say definitely pay attention to knowing assessment well, being able to use assessment methods and formats well, and being very clear on what exactly the subject matter one is teaching stands for. With that level of clarity in terms of what the concepts, the skills, the outcomes are for what one is teaching, and to use assessment data to inform the instruction, I think that would be very helpful with using differentiated instruction. Now, the second thing I want to address is you had asked what aspect from Singapore do I think is most important for other educators from around the world to actually include. Actually, this is a question I do not wish to answer because I think it will go against the ethos of my presentation to begin with, which is that I think that every country or every context on their own have to decide for themselves what works for them and what they stand for. So in the Singapore case, we value efficiency, pragmatism, balance, collectiveness, and so on and so forth, right? And so that comes off in the way in which we localize differentiated instruction in Singapore. But for other countries in, Saudi Arabia, in Kazakhstan, in Philippines, they may value different things. So DI may then look a little different in their context. So I guess I would, not answer that question. Yeah.
Thanks so much, AP Heng. And I also understand your point on, how every region should be looking at it from their own perspective.
I want to say something.
Sure, Ms. Afa.
Yeah, okay. Differentiated instruction is an essential for meeting the diverse of students' need. I'm going to focus here or highly recommended for the school. Maybe I'm gonna mention some recommendation for the school to implement it effectively. Foster growth mindset among educator. So the school should encourage teacher to view differentiation as an opportunity to support all the learners rather than overwhelming challenging. Professional development and collaboration can help build confidence in using differentiation strategies. Also, use flexible grouping, allow students to work in varied group based on their level, skills, interest, or learning style. The third thing is provide multiple ways to access content. Offer varied instruction methods such as hand-on-hand activity, digital tools, or visual ed, storytelling. All these activities help students to engage with the materials in way to set in way to be suitable for their learning reference. And also we can implement choice-based learning, give a student options in how they demonstrate their understanding, whether through writing, presentation, gaming, technology, or based projects. It depends. Finally, also use ongoing assessment, regular formative assessment, such as exit ticket, quizzes, and observation. All these methods help teacher adjust instruction to meet the student involving their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Safa. I think that was quite helpful for especially people who are educators who are, just about to introduce differentiated instruction within their classrooms, or even, just the topic of it, just introduced to it. So we do have a couple of questions. Maybe for this one, I would like to get Ms. Malika's opinion about it. Jonalyn asked, do you suggest differentiated assessment to be used as an assessment for heterogeneous learners in the classroom? Based on your experience with working with the teachers and throughout the academic year, do you think that this is a recommendation, or how would you go about with diverse learners in that sense?
If I may add, as a school leader, we do believe that differentiation is not only a job of a teacher. As soon as the teacher is left alone with the differentiation, it's going to be a collapse of everything. Like, you cannot require any kind of quality from the teacher when you do not provide anything, the resources, the area, the opportunities, even the assistance. When you do not provide with this kind of level basic needs for a teacher, then you cannot ask for a quality lesson and quality differentiation itself. Yes, the teacher might use some kind of differentiation for using purpose, but then if we want to have it a quality outcome in the end, then we do need to provide some more opportunities from the administration level. So as I said in my speech, we try not to have heterogeneous students in one classroom, especially in the most important subjects as English and math and science. Of course, it is difficult for us to divide the students into the phases in science, since we still are figuring out how to divide the students into phases. But from the next year, we are planning to divide the students into phases according to their English language skill. Just like we divide them in English, we are going to have the same phases in science. So this gives an opportunity to have not these heterogeneous students in one group, but then the students of the same level of interest, from the same age, with the same skills in one group. This gives the teacher more opportunities to think of more ideas how to implement differentiation within this small group, because differentiation doesn't only stand for using different methods in a heterogeneous group, but then it also stands using it in the smaller group stands. That is why I guess first of all, the school administration needs to make sure that whether the teacher is comfortable or convenient in using differentiation or not in this, like in the given circumstance. If the teacher is not convenient, then the school administration needs to think of more ideas how to ease the teacher's job.
Can I
Thank you.
add in briefly to this?
Yes,
Actually,
you.
I do have a question for Ms. Malika. I may have missed out on the details earlier. I'm curious, Ms. Malika, when you talk about in Kazakhstan, when there is this phase approach, right? When this phase approach and students are then grouped according to different levels of their readiness, do they eventually, at the end of the year, do they have the same curricular outcome, or do they have different curricular outcome at the end of the year with this phased approach?
That's a great question. No, they do have the same curricular outcome. They do have the same curricula. But as you said, you mentioned in your speech about scaffolding. The same thing happens in these phases. For example, phase one is the students with like A students, the ones who are really quick and are ready to work on their own. But then the phase two students are the middle students, and the phase three students are the ones who are struggling. And assistants mainly are used in phase three because they need some more support from the teachers rather than phase one students. But they have the same outcome, they have the same curriculum, but then if phase three students do not reach all the agenda of the outcome, it is okay. So Phase 3 students need to reach at least 70% of the agenda of the curriculum. If they reach 70%, then it's okay. If they do not reach 70%, then we talk with the teacher, find out the way how to help, because there is a problem. It means there is a problem. But then if they reach 70%, then it's okay. Of course, the phase 2 and phase 1 students have to cover all 100%. And we do understand actually that this might give some maybe doubts about phase 3, like how about the rest of the 30%? But then visiting Singapore, actually listening to some professors from NIE saying that the more doesn't mean the better, especially about your program, the joy of learning, right? We decided that we would rather focus on really the joy of learning, make these students more comfortable in learning, and then in the end of the year, we would rather have these students more interested in learning the language rather than the outcome itself. And of course, at the beginning of the year, the parents are actually informed about the phase, the differences between the phase. The students can actually jump from phase 1 to phase 2. They must jump, and we do encourage them to jump and do better. But then if the students, there are some students who are really struggling with the language learning, like considering that we do have 2 more languages, and English language is completely different because it is Cyrillic, and we have Cyrillic the letters, and those are Latin letters. We do understand that sometimes, especially in the primary school, the students do not have to have cover 100% of the curriculum. That's why 70% is okay for us.
Thank you. And I asked this question because I think this is a perfect example of how, this notion of differentiation may actually take on different interpretations in different contexts. I think this is a perfect example because like what Ms. Malika mentioned, right, about how actually, even though it's phase 1, 2, 3, they all have the same goals or outcome at the end of the year, but they are grouped into more homogeneous readiness classroom to achieve that outcome. In the case of Singapore, we actually call that subject banding. Okay, we call that subject banding in Singapore rather than differentiating. But that's because, again, we are using these terms in different ways. So we call that subject banding in Singapore. So students may go into more of lower level, faster level, or lower level, but then at the end they may still they would still be going to for the same outcome. So that's quite interesting. And I think in the UK they actually call the idea, they call it setting, setting, which is that at the end of the year they have the same goals, but then to get there they may be in different classroom that's organized according to their different readiness level. So I thought this is just a perfect example of how this notion of differentiation is also interpreted differently everywhere. Now, there's one thing I want to address, which is a question of differentiated assessment. I'm not sure what the JL, let's see, Jonalyn is actually referring to when Jonalyn used the word differentiated assessment. So I'm not sure whether we actually answered Jonalyn's question. Jonalyn, what is your definition of differentiated assessment? Because even the word differentiated assessment, I find it is used so loosely that sometimes I'm not sure what it really means. So maybe while Jonalyn is clarifying differentiated assessment, I might want to address Lazel. If I didn't pronounce your name wrongly, I'm sorry. From the Philippines, Lazel is asking, what should we do about using differentiated instruction in an under-resourced environment and with overcrowded classroom? I hear that, and I think this is a concern of many teachers when they actually use differentiated instruction, right? What do we do if, for example, in China, the classroom can go up, in inland China, the classroom sizes can go up to 50 students, 60 students. So how is the teacher supposed to use differentiated instruction in that context? So I'm going to try a little bit. Maybe Malika and Safa will have more ideas. With very big classroom, I mean, as in Singapore, we have 40 in a class, and that's fairly big already. What can happen is to group students into groups rather than thinking that you can reach out to every single student. So that's the first thing. Don't assume to begin with that in differentiated instruction, you have to reach out to every single student. So try to find similarities across groups to group them in that way. The second thing I find is that teachers often find that it's hard for them to group because they don't know, they can't get enough assessment data quick enough. So one way that I had given an example for earlier is using technology, but yet in an under-resourced context, technology may not work. So what could then happen would be to use things like traffic light system. So which is like little cards which you can give your students, red, orange, and green. And then whenever you ask a question, ask students, to show whether they understand or not, and then if they don't understand, they will have to use red. If they are halfway there, they have to use orange. If it's green, it means that they understand what's going on. So you can then figure out whether or not you can proceed with the pace of your instruction, or having mini whiteboards for students, or maybe not even whiteboards, but just if it's under resourced, getting a plastic sheet of paper or a plastic bag with and then using a marker and writing on it, so that when teacher is asking a question and wants to get formative assessment data, students can just write on a plastic bag or on a piece of paper, and then they show it up to the teacher, so the teacher can use these as ways in which to cull or collect quick formative assessment information to decide whether or not to move forward. So these are just some ideas that I have briefly. So I don't know whether Malika or Safa may have more ideas of how to support DEI in under-resourced and overcrowded classroom.
Let me say something. Applying differentiated instruction in a classroom with 15 students or more can be a little bit challenging, but with the right strategies, it's possible to meet diverse learning need effectively. For example, you can use flexible grouping, divide the student in a small group based on their learning level, interest, or strength. Rotate groups regularly to ensure collaboration and peer learning. Also, you can use varied instruction methods. For example, you can use a mix of visual and auditory and hand activities to engage different learning style. Also, incorporate use video discussions and experiment different things, and you can apply in the classroom. Also, to read the assign different, for example, assignments. Give each group different assignment to let them collaborate with each other. Also, give a student choice to choose what is suitable for them to present a differentiation. For example, group A writing presentation or a digital project. Also, you can activate the technology integration, use adaptive learning platform that personalized lessons based on the student progress, online quizzes, interactive apps. Also, all these things can help you manage large classroom. Also, peer teaching and collaboration. Encourage students to teach each other in grouping, discussion, presentation. And finally, ongoing assessment. Use different type of assessment, as I mentioned before, exit ticket, quizzes, observation to track the student progress and adjust instruction accordingly. I hope the answer is clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Safar. Thank you, Ivy. Now, just looking at the time that we have left in order to accommodate for the last portion, perhaps we can wrap the segment up. I think it's been a very, very insightful discussion with all the speakers. And, if there's any, perhaps if there's any last words pertaining to Jonalyn's portion on the assessment. And then after that, perhaps we'll wrap things up from there.
Yeah, if I may add something about the differentiation in the under-resourced circumstances and about the overcrowded classroom. Once when one of my beginning teachers asked like, why should I use differentiation? Which is a good question. One thing I would say that the teacher should avoid using differentiation just for the purpose of using differentiation. Like it should be used as a tool when it is needed. When the classroom is overcrowded, when there are not enough resources, I would not actually waste my time trying to differentiate anything. I would actually use the traditional methods of teaching, teacher-centered learning, which, well, it's the foundation, and no one has actually suffered from teacher-centered learning. So teaching, that's why I would use teacher-centered learning first, but then of course, when you use differentiation, when you apply differentiation, it motivates the students. It actually makes the students have a good rapport with the teacher. So I guess it depends on the purpose of the teacher. If you want to stay to remain in the hearts of your students, in the hearts of your students, then of course you should apply some types of differentiation, one method at a time, and find out the one which works best with the students. We only use 2 types of differentiation in this school because students love it, but we are not trying to, I don't know, run after some more methods of differentiation. We are very careful in using new methods of differentiation because we need to see whether students like it or not. So the only time you need to try to use differentiation in your case when the classroom is overcrowded and there are not enough resources is just to motivate your students, just to have something different, maybe one time in a week. But the other time, I would actually stick on traditional teacher-centered learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malika. Thank you everyone so much for your time today, as well as for our speakers. I think they have all given a very diverse perspective towards differentiated instruction and their experience, as well as the research that they have put together across for us to learn today. And with that, I would like to thank everyone here who has been participative, who has been listening to us from beginning till now. And I hope that I hope that this has been a very insightful session, and I hope that the Q&A segment has also provided a lot of perspectives and food for thought, especially when embarking on your next steps as educators or in schools and school leaders.